Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is February 5th, 2024, and we are continuing with our reading with the Seth materials. And I want to apologize for last week's recording. The video was a little blurry, so I hope you were able to either follow the caption on Zoom or follow in your book. But anyways, let's do it. Here we go. I hope this week would be better. So, I mean, video-wise, I hope it's clearer. So we'll see. Okay, chapter 5, A Psychologist's Letter. Gives me the jitters. Seth's reassurance. In early February, Rob wrote to Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was connected with the Department of Neurology and Psychology at the University of Virginia. Dr. Stevenson was interested in reincarnation, and we had just read about his work. Rob also sent him copies of a few sessions, including some of the information we had been given about our own past lives. According to this, we lived several existences in the very distant past, including one in Denmark 3 centuries ago, when Rob and I were father and son, and Seth, a mutual friend. Our last lives were in Boston in the 19th century. I was unhappy with the reincarnation material simply because I still didn't want to accept the idea. It just seemed too far out. I didn't exactly encourage Rob to ask Seth to enlarge on this information or to fill it on the details he'd given, but it was part of the material. I could hardly deny that. Dr. Stevenson wrote us a letter, much like one I would probably write today to someone else under the same circumstances. He thought that the fluency of the material suggested a subconscious origin, but emphasized that at this stage it was impossible to tell. He also told us that amateur mediumship could produce mental symptoms under certain conditions. Oh, great, I said to Rob. Do I act any nuttier than usual? Rob solemnly assured me that there had been no change in my behavior. Actually, he had been watching for such signs, and so had I. But Dr. Stevenson's well-meaning warning did throw me for somewhat of a loop, even though we had read the same cautions ourselves in some of our psychic books. In a way, Dr. Stevenson's letter came at an unfortunate time. It had been impossible to keep the sessions absolutely secret. Eventually, some of our friends were bound to come around on a Monday or Wednesday evening and hear the odd voice from outside the door, as Philip just did before we wrote Dr. Stevenson. As a result, Phil began to attend occasional sessions. I'm using the entity name that Seth gave him, since his family didn't understand his interest in psychic phenomena, a situation we've encountered more than once. Phil lives out of state but travels to Elmira every 6 weeks or so on business. Just a few days before we received Dr. Stevenson's letter, we had an unscheduled session with Phil present. We gave him paper and pen to write down any questions he might have, but Phil never got a chance to write anything down. According to him, Seth answered each of his questions in turn as Phil formed them in his mind. Phil wrote and signed a statement to this effect. This was the first sign of any kind of telepathy or clairvoyance in the sessions. Phil was really astonished, and so was I. I took Phil at his word, but I also thought that coincidence could have explained the episode. Just the same, my spirits rose. Then a few days later, Dr. Stevenson's letter came and I went into a slump. See if Seth has anything to say about that letter, Rob said. I agreed, but when I became tense, it was difficult to relax enough to have a session. I skipped our next scheduled session as a result, but I recovered my equilibrium when the next Monday came. Seth had quite a bit to say. A fond and exasperated good evening, he began. The exasperation comes because your good psychologist almost undermined the confidence I managed to give Rupert in our session with your friend Philip. I tried to build Rupert's confidence, and some stranger tore it down. His intentions were of the best, but I suppose that I must now feel obligated, and I do, to go into the matter of mental and emotional stability and any dangers to such stability that might be involved here. As far as Rupert is concerned, there is no danger. For one thing, I am a sensitive but disciplined and sensible, if somewhat irascible gentleman. None of the communications from me are in any way conducive to instability. I may make bold to remark that I am more stable than you or Rupert or the fine psychologist. I feel a strong responsibility for you and for any results coming from our communications. If anything, the personal advice I have given you both should add to your mental and emotional balance and result in a stronger relationship with the outside world. I do depend upon Rupert's willingness to dissociate. There is no doubt that he is unaware at times of his surroundings during sessions. It is a phenomenon in which he gives consent, and he could at any time return his conscious attention to his physical environment. There is no danger of dissociation grabbing hold of him like some black, vague, or furry monster, carrying him away into the Netherlands of hysteria, schizophrenia, or insanity. I have consistently advised contacts with the world at large and told you both to use your abilities to meet outside challenges. Withdrawal into dissociation as a hiding place from the world could be dangerous, and many have fallen prey here. With Rupert, this is not the case. For one thing, Rupert's ego is extremely strong. His intuition is the gateway that relaxes an otherwise stubborn and domineering ego. At this, Rob looked up and laughed. The intuitive qualities, however, are not frivolous, and the personality is well integrated. Seth went on to describe dissociation, saying that I was always aware of my surroundings to some degree in sessions. It is true, he said, that a state of dissociation is necessary. But because you open a door, this does not mean that you cannot close it, nor does it mean that you cannot have two doors open at once. And this is my point. You can have two doors open at once, and you can listen to two channels at once. In the meantime, you must turn down the volume of the first channel while you learn to attune your attention to the second. This process you call dissociation. When Seth paused, Rob asked, "What do you have to say about Dr. Stevenson's idea that this may all be Jane's subconscious?" "We have gone into this before," Seth said, "and I have no doubt that we will on endless occasions. And if I succeed in convincing you of my reality as a separate personality, I will have done exceedingly well. It should be apparent that my communications come through Rupert's subconscious, but as a fish swims through water. But the fish is not the water. I am not Rupert's subconscious." The slight evidence of telepathy I gave you had a purpose. I wanted to show you that telepathy did exist, and I wanted to show Rupert that more than his own subconscious, as he knows it was involved. Now, Rupert assembles me or allows me to assemble myself in a way that will be recognizable to you. But regardless of this, I exist in an independent manner. Later elaborations on the above statement gave us a pretty fair idea of what inner processes go on so that Seth and I can make contact. This involves the construction of a psychological bridge that will be explained later in this book. At this point, I'd been speaking as Seth for about 40 minutes, and he recommended a rest period, saying, "Sometime between now and 25 years of laying your doubts at rest, I would like to go into some other matters that I have been trying to tackle for several sessions, but take your rest, pussies." I used to envy Rob his viewpoint of the sessions. He could see and hear me as Seth and I couldn't. Now, during break, I questioned him again. I hated to have to depend on someone else to tell me what was going on, but I had learned one thing. I couldn't be Jane and Seth at once. For Seth to come through, I had to stop such mental quibbling, at least temporarily. After break, Seth said, "Again, I am not Rupert's subconscious, though I speak through it. It is the atmosphere through which I can come to you, as the air is the atmosphere through which a bird flies. A certain reassembly of myself is necessary. This is done partially by me and partially by the combined subconscious efforts of you and Rupert. Will this satisfy you for now? Sure, Seth, Rob said. Please be frank, as I do not like this hanging over our heads, Seth said. Then he went on to give us some information concerning entities and the various personalities that compose them. Rob was particularly curious about the differences between entities and personalities. Individual life, or rather the life of any present individual, could be legitimately compared to the dream of an entity. While the individual enjoys his given number of years, these are but a flash to the entity. The entity is concerned with these years in somewhat the same manner with which you are concerned with your dreams. As you give inner purpose and organization to your dreams and obtain insight and satisfaction from them, though they involve only a part of your life, so the entity, to some extent, directs and gives purpose and organization to his personalities. Infinities of diversity and opportunity are given to the personalities by the entity. Your own dreams are fragments, even as in a larger sense, you are fragments of your entity. Seth also said that an inner part of each personality was aware of its relationship with its entity, and that this portion did man's breathing for him and controlled those bodily processes that we consider involuntary. The session lasted until 11:30 p.m. Rob was reassured by Seth's statement about my ability to handle dissociation and by his responsible attitude. I was too, but I kept thinking of the remark in Dr. Stevenson's letter. Of course, Seth said that everything was okay, I said. What else could we expect him to say? For a while, I think I spent half the time trying to psychoanalyze Seth and the other half trying to analyze myself. Caution is one thing, but sometimes I went overboard. Even so, Seth said that my strong ego was an asset to our work when I didn't overdo it, since it kept my whole personality on an even keel and allowed me the psychological strength to handle and develop my abilities. One small but amusing incident came up that illustrates my attitude during those early months. We have a lovely, large apartment that has, unfortunately, a tiny closet-sized kitchen. When we moved into our present apartment, the kitchen held a stove and a small refrigerator that didn't begin to hold all our food. We got a larger one for the foods that we didn't use every day, and this second refrigerator I put in our huge bathroom, a great old-fashioned tiled room that easily 5 times as large as the kitchen. I knew that this was a crazy place for a refrigerator, but after a while I became used to it. In early spring, Rob came down with several annoying gum boils, and one night he asked Seth how he might get rid of them. Seth immediately launched into a rather hilarious discussion of the unsanitary aspects of a refrigerator in the bathroom. He made a few kindly but definite statements to the effect that we should know better, and suggested that the appliance be moved into the kitchen, where it would hold all our refrigerated food. Oops, sorry. He assured Rob his gum boils would disappear. No control personality or whatever is going to tell me how to run the house, I said. This is one of those suspicious signs that we've read about. The control personality starts throwing its weight around and trying to dominate the medium's normal personality. Remember what Dr. Stevenson said? Besides, there's no room in the kitchen for the big refrigerator. Do what you want, Rob said. I've got gum boils, but so what? I can live with them. Well, besides, Rob said, Seth didn't order you to do anything. I asked him a question and he answered it. When I'm reacting emotionally and Rob gives me a reasonable reply, it always puts me on the defensive, so I agree. The next day, we moved the big refrigerator. To save my pride or whatever, I put the little refrigerator in the bathroom and turned it into a towel chest. The big refrigerator is still in the kitchen. I got rid of the small one long ago. Oh yes, Rob's gum boils cleared up in 2 days and never returned. In other words, I used to watch Seth like a hawk, particularly during the first year or so, but he always behaved intelligently, with dignity and humor. As soon as I began judging him by his actions, and his effects on us, I dropped this habit. He won my trust. He has given us excellent psychologically sound advice, and he never tried to give us orders. Sometimes we followed his counsel, but to our advantage. Other times we didn't go along for reasons of our own. In 1964, we went house hunting, for example. Seth suggested we purchase a particular house. We liked it very much, but it was in poor condition. Seth might very well be right, we thought, and we might be happier if we bought the house, but we just weren't willing to take the chance. About a year and a half ago, Seth suggested that I leave my job at the art gallery and give psychic classes. He even told me how many students I would have within 3 months' time. I followed his advice, though I didn't really think there would be much response in this area. Seth was correct. I've enjoyed the classes, learned a great deal from them, and enlarged my own abilities as a result, in ways I didn't know were possible. During the first 6 months or so of the sessions, our cat Willie began behaving in a most unsociable manner. A few times he began to hiss and spit quite madly just before sessions. One night he really startled us. We were getting ready to begin, and Willie was sleeping in the bedroom closet. Suddenly, he ran out of the closet, fur on end, bolted through the living room, and hid behind the curtains. Once he nipped at my ankles as I was speaking for Seth, and in trance, I dragged him half across the room while he hung on to the bottom of my slacks. Rob had to shut him in the studio. Finally, Rob asked Seth if he knew what was wrong. The reply was that Willie's very acute senses picked up Seth's presence just before session time. He told us that the cat's behavior would change as Willie became more accustomed to the situation. A month or so later, Willie became himself again. Now he pays no attention to the sessions and even occasionally jumps into my lap when I'm in trance. During this time, Rob had a recurrence of back trouble, though far less severe than before. Seth devoted several long sessions to an analysis of Rob's condition and explained the reasons for the symptoms. They disappeared without medication, and we think that the knowledge Rob gained through these sessions was responsible. Earlier, we had purchased the Kennedy rocker because of Rob's back. He used to sit in it to take session notes for a while. It was the only chair in which he was comfortable. He no longer needed it when he recovered, and I got into the habit of using it. Much later, when I finally consented to sit down during sessions, it would be my favorite Seth chair. We quickly learned that Seth regarded physical symptoms as the outward materialization of inner dis-ease. He emphasized the importance of suggestion and the dangers of self-pity. He did tell us then that when one of us was ill, the other was not to offer excessive consolation and thereby reinforce the idea of sickness. In later sessions, he would give some excellent material on maintaining good health. This will be covered in chapter 13. I've devoted some time and space to the early Seth sessions so that the reader could become acquainted with part of the material as it was given to us. Some of it seems so rudimentary to us now that it's difficult to recall the amazement we felt at the time. It was the continuing sense of discovery and intellectual curiosity that led us on and that finally resolved my own doubts. So many developments occurred in the following months that it is difficult to cover them all. We were both to have our first out-of-body experiences, or astral projections. Our experiments in what Seth calls psychological time helped us develop our own psychic abilities. The quality and scope of the Seth material constantly grew, and we were to make some contacts with others in the field of parapsychology. We were shortly to discover that Seth was indeed clairvoyant, and that my own training as a medium had only begun. End of chapter 5. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. And we will continue next week, same time. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye now.